I wanted to talk a little bit more about piriformis syndrome and my back pain experience in case I could help anybody else. Because again, I went through something really crazy at one point in my life that I didn't need to suffer through. Well, I mean, if I had received information differently in a timely manner, things would have been different for me. I pretty much, the first year of grad school was a nightmare because I was pretty much disabled in a back spasm for almost 9 months. And this story I'm going to tell, this back pain story, is something that I think about a lot when I read about chronic pain science, and I'm told a lot of things about how pain works, and then I think of my own example and it doesn't check out for me because my pain was physiological. It took a bunch of different physiological realities to create the pain problem. And that's, I think, a logical step that's missing a lot of times when people say, oh, well, you can have people with piriformis syndrome, they find it in cadavers all the time, and those people never had pain. Therefore, piriformis syndrome doesn't cause pain, and it's in your head. It's not the real physiological finding. And the chronic pain science people will also say things like your spinal MRIs don't mean anything, that if you have bulging discs, that's not a cause of pain because, again, healthy people without pain have abnormal findings in their MRIs. And I'm not denying that you can have piriformis syndrome and have an annular bulge like I do at L5S1 and not have pain. But I'm also saying that that still can cause pain when you combine it with other genetic, congenital, and lifestyle factors. So in my case, I had a ton of things going on that no one told me about or talked about or thought about or realized. One of them is that I probably have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which no one had heard about in my first year of grad school over 10 years ago. In any case, I am for sure hypermobile, and I've been hypermobile since I can remember. And I was not hypermobile, and I'm not hypermobile now because of my personality traits or my emotions or my processing of anger or my stress or my autonomic nervous system. At 5 years old, my toes, I can walk, I can curl my toes over like this and walk on them. And I've been able to do that since I was a kid. I can do the thumb touching the forearm thing. I can't show you because I'm holding my phone. I can do the flat on the floor bending over thing. Like I can pretty much almost put my forearms on the floor just by like leaning over. And I've had sorry to make you car sick, super mobile pelvic ligaments ever since I was a little kid. I remember in 6th grade we had some tests and I was like one of the only people who's just like so flexible in all these different ways with my hips. So when your body has super loose ligaments and lots of flexibility, something like static standing or even moving, you put more into stabilizing yourself. Okay, on top of that, I have an extra bone in both my ankles. I found this out. I got a foot x-ray 10 years ago. And what that does is it causes instability in my ankles. Which causes my arches to fall inward like that. So my ankles pronate, my feet fall flat, and then my knees also roll inwards and pronate. When I allow my feet to do this, I have pain in my knees, I have pain in my feet, and I have pain in my hips and in my lower back, actually right around L5S1. Hi, Nisa. Say hi. Hi, baby. When I roll my feet out, like I do when I'm wearing orthotics, my knees become normal. I feel relief in my lower back and my hip flexors and my hip rotators. The consequence to my external hip rotators for my normal way of being is tension. When my feet roll in, my knees roll in, it causes for stabilization of my pelvis, my external hip rotators tighten. And they tighten naturally just when I dance and walk. Normally they get really tight. So on top of that, I found out that I have a split sciatic nerve in my left piriformis. So the sciatic nerve normally goes under the piriformis muscle, which is an external hip rotator. And on my left side, it branches, and one of the branches goes through the piriformis that was found on an MRN. So in my case, when the muscles get tight, which they do because of my pronation, because of my extra ankle bone, and because of my loose ligaments from Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that tightness squeezes my sciatic nerve in my piriformis area and causes back pain to radiate up my spine. I had local anesthetic injected into my external hip rotators at one point, and then also just specifically into my piriformis at one point, and it was amazing for 8 hours, as long as the anesthetic lasted. Like, my whole lower back felt better. And I had all these epidurals and facet joint injections and nerve blocks in my spine that did nothing. They did nothing at all. Steroid injections, local anesthetic in my spine did nothing. And my pain was in my spine. I had no idea my problems were coming from my hips and my external hip rotators and my piriformis. And then I had this external hip rotator injections, and I was like, whoa, that area is referring the pain to my spine. Oh. So unfortunately, there's really nothing I can do about this except management. But I will say, and as you might know from watching some of my videos, that I have learned to manage this, and I've done quite well. I mean, I have to wear orthotics, and I have to wear like practical shoes as much as possible, and I wear really squishy shoes around the house. And if I keep my feet rolled out, I reduce pressure on my spine by reducing pressure in my external hip rotators. I also do a ton of myofascial massage and release on my body. And I have to do that, I think, probably because of the hypermobility and the tension that happens as a result, especially since I now have to stand all the time because of the pain of the pudendal neuralgia I have on the right side that started 4 years ago after a surgery. But when I was in grad school and I had this horrible, almost year-long nightmare of spasm, like no one told me about myofascial release. I was only told to do strengthening exercises in physical therapy, and those just made me worse. No one explained about like releasing your muscles, and it was specific muscle groups that I need to release. My IT bands from my knee to my hip, I have to do a foam roller. I have to use like a lacrosse ball in my hip rotators and my hips, and I have to use a right, which is like, I can maybe show you. It's like another device that releases my psoas, which is in the abdomen, and I kind of get that point in here in my pelvis. And that makes a huge difference to my lower back pain. So clearly a lot of stuff is structural and it is anatomical, and doctors just don't know it. At the time that I had my back pain nightmare in grad school, I was a music major MA student, and I was so happy to be in school again, and I loved ballet so much. I was just doing ballet as a hobby, and also because I was doing musical theater and I wanted to be a better dancer and like get cast in better shows. So I was taking intermediate ballet with the dance majors at the same time, which was a terrible idea. As my podiatrist, who saw my extra ankle bone, told me, and saw my feet and the hypermobility in my feet, he said, "You should not be a ballet dancer. This is not for you." But I really loved it, and so I was trying, and then the problem was that I was doing these really, really intense ballet classes twice a week for like 2 hours each time, and then the rest of my life, my entire life, outside of that, I was so slammed as a grad student. I was just sitting in chairs in class, in all my classes, just sitting, and I was commuting, even worse. The commuting was really killing my back, and then I was going home, and I was spending like 20 hours a week researching and writing papers. And those two things, plus I didn't know about, I was overstretching, which I didn't know was a problem because I didn't know I had hypermobility and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And then I was not doing myofascial release, which is different than stretching. Well, I now understand what happened to me at that time, but at the time, and all the doctors that I saw, just all they could say was facet joint injections, epidurals, nerve blocks. That stuff never helped me. I only got better at that time, just through time, and resting, and eventually doing water aerobics. But like, it took me more years of suffering with repeated problems before I learned about myofascial release, before I learned about my feet, before I learned about the hypermobility, and that I shouldn't just like stretch the bejesus out of myself as like a therapeutic thing because I am hypermobile. Ultimately, not all bodies are able to do all things. Just because I wanted to be a ballet dancer doesn't mean my body can do that without it hurting me. And just because it hurts me when I do that does not mean that my pain was coming because of my personality or my stress levels. It was actually a physiological, structural thing. And as it turns out, I actually can do ballet again. And I started doing ballet about, again, five years after my initial injury where I thought I'd never dance again. The difference is that I can't push myself for flexibility. I can't try to have the highest arabesque possible. I can't push myself to do the splits. I have to take it easy. I can't try to compete with like professional dancers. I have to be very mindful of my movements, and I have to do myofascial release after every class and pretty much any day I want to be active.